La vida es corta sin parar, mirar y de reír para celebrar. Cada momento hay que gozar, como si mañana no va a llegar.
Hola, hola. Welcome to Entre Tías y Amiguis, the podcast where we dive into the wild roller coaster ride of adulting. I'm your host, Audrey Rodriguez, a queer Salvadorian native, a first-gen trailblazer, a multipreneur and licensed psychotherapist, here to share wisdom, stories, and real talk with my tías and amiguis and other incredible guests who inspire and uplift our community. I want to remind you that while I am a licensed psychotherapist, this podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. The discussions we have here are not substitute for professional mental health advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Now let's dive into today's conversation and explore the journey of adulting together. Grab your cafecito, get comfy, and let's get started. Well, good morning and welcome to another episode of Entre Tías y Amiguis. Today is very special because we're trying something very, very new, which is record a live episode. We have a couple of folks here in the room with us who are going to be helping us to think about the topic that we're going to be talking about, how to survive the holidays. And so to begin with, if you have been listening to the podcast, I always start with introducing myself and talking a little bit about my identities, because I believe that all these little ways that who I am and the experiences that I've had, how they intersect really inform like the lens, not only as a therapist, as an educator, as a business owner, but as a person who's navigating the world, right? And so I'm Audrey Rodriguez, she, her, hers, ella. I'm a queer, Salvadoreña, inmigrante, eldest daughter of immigrants. So if you know, you know, like what all of these identities mean. And so today with me, I have my dear friend, Victoria Cortez, who's also a licensed marriage and family therapist. And we're going to be talking about, hopefully today, leaving you with a survival kit for the holidays, because they can be complicated, even though they're about joy and about family. Sometimes like they can be really stressful. So we're hoping to leave you today with some tangible things, but if anything, at least to say like, girl, me too, right? So with that said, hi, Victoria, why don't you introduce yourself to us before we get started?
Hi, I'm Victoria Cortez. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I'm also the founder of First Gen Feeler, and I'm a boundaries and wellness coach and a speaker. And so I just wanted to share the definition of First Gen Feeler because I found that's who I started to work with a lot. Ooh. And it's someone who is part of the first generation in their family to actively pursue their own healing, feel their own emotions, and or break unhealthy patterns that have been passed down for generations. And I feel like, you know, that's a lot of us. And we seem to have a string of guilt and shame throughout our cultures that unite us just a little bit, that unite us. But I find that in community and by talking about these things, we can destigmatize mental health and also asking questions and trying to be better ancestors for those who come after us.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for having me.
No, thank you for actually sharing that definition with us, because what it makes me think about is that a lot of the times we have this association around like being first gen, being like going to college or going to build a business or doing like these things are like really tangible. But like what you're talking about is like, we're like the first ones to be feeling the feelings this way. And there's so many layers to that. There is privilege to that when you're surviving, right? Like feelings kind of get put in the back burner, et cetera, et cetera. So the idea that as a first gen, you also are kind of like the first one in this journey, not only of doing all the things that are tangible and expected of you, but also feeling all the feelings that maybe have never been felt before, or that you know that they should have been felt, but it's like no one talks about them. So I really appreciate that you started with that.
Yeah. And it feels, I know like for a lot of people, they're like, and I just made a post on this. It was, you know, you don't have to be the one to solve all of the family patterns, like the generational traumas. It doesn't have to be you. But through inner work, we sort of get to do those ripple effects and see that happen in a positive way. And so it doesn't always have to be only you, because sometimes it's like, okay, this is a privilege. It's a privilege to do this inner work. And also sometimes it feels like it's a burden to have this work as well. And so we're trying to find a balance to where you can also reconnect with yourself and feel safe within yourself, and also enjoy the parts of life that you want to.
Mm-hmm. I love it. I love it. Okay, well, let's jump into the conversation, because you're setting up the stage for us to talk about, and just for those of you who may not be from Latinx culture or who may identify as a part of a collectivistic culture that is not similar as ours. We're going to be talking from that lens of like some of the experiences, some of the work that we do with some of our clients as well, around like the themes that we see in the season of the holidays. So please stay, even if like it doesn't directly hit your circumstances, like there may be like some of those things that like for you, it's like, oh, that's how it shows up in my family. And if anything, maybe that is the question that we want you to be thinking about, or like the lens of just like, how does that show up in my family, if at all? And if it doesn't, then kind of on to the next thing, right? And so to begin with, I want to talk about cultural values in Latinx culture, because we have collectivism, we have marianismo, we have machismo, we have familismo, we have respeto. Like we literally as Latinx folks have like a whole bag of expectations that whether we're aware of them or not, like consciously, we're carrying them around. So how do you see from your perspective, both personally and professionally, that these values that we carry, these values that has been like put into us, show up around the holidays? Like what are you seeing in your work, or what are you seeing for you personally?
It's, I think, a lot of expectations. And as one of the older daughters in my family, right, it's thinking, okay, when I go to this party, I'm not just going to sit. I'm going to be doing things, right? And it's different depending where I go, because then I go to some of my tia's houses and they're very, like cariñosas, and they just want to love me and make sure I eat 3 plates of food. And so, it's different. But so I think going into this holiday season, recognizing there are certain things that are being done without people even thinking about it, that it's just patterns. And I do have an anecdote, and I asked permission to
Please do. I want to hear it. Real life calls are always welcome.
I called my mother-in-law yesterday. And so just for a little bit of context, my husband is Black and Honduran. And so my mother-in-law, she's from Texas, and she's a proud Black woman. And so it's just, molding the cultures as well in this journey. And I'm just so blessed with my in-laws. They're just so wonderful. I can't say enough wonderful things. So if they're listening, you're wonderful. But, I realized after the first few celebrations, she wouldn't ask my husband to do anything, but she would ask me for help. And she would say, hey, we're doing something over here. Will you help put this together? And I'm like, yeah, sure. Like that's the way I was raised. And then it would happen again. It would happen again. I had this conversation with my husband those times, and I said, and I was getting mad a little bit. And I was saying, how come you don't get asked to do things? And he goes, I offer, I come up and I offer because, that's the way our marriage is. We're very, equal parts and helpful. And so then eventually we come to a holiday where I think it just was, I was like, it's just not sitting right with me. And he goes, well, you and my mom have a good relationship. Do you feel like you could talk to her about it? And I was like, that's true. Your mom is not my mom. It's different because, we have different boundaries and communications with everyone. And I love my mom. But, we're just different. Mm-hmm. And so after everything was done, the holiday was done, I, go up to my mother-in-law and I said, can I talk to you about something? And I know it's because we have a safe relationship that I can bring this up. And she goes, okay, what is it? And I told her, I said, oh, I've noticed this is what happens around, whenever we're doing things when we visit. She goes, I didn't even realize that I did that. Mm-hmm. I'm so sorry. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes it's just that people do things without even recognizing that this has also been a little bit ingrained, right? It's like, yeah, or, I am outgoing. I am. And so maybe it's also like, oh, she loves to help. And I'm like, yeah, I love to help, but also, spread it around. Let's all do this together. Or, for myself, I think growing up in the Latino culture and seeing so many different types of families, for me, it was important to marry somebody who knew that the work would be shared. That because I think for myself, I was like, I don't want to be, the wife in the kitchen cooking while you're sitting and watching TV. And for a lot, I think, of people in our cultures, we see that, right? The gentleman will sit and just enjoy. And I'm not saying it's everybody. I'm just saying it happens a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And so for myself, I remember when I was dating my now husband, I would say that. I said, look, these are the things that I don't want for my future. And so and he didn't want that either. He goes, oh, no, that's not the way I was raised. And so having this conversation and having that safety to have it with my mother-in-law, that was also creating a new neuronal pathway in my own brain to say, I can speak up and have a safe conversation. Granted, that's also within context and knowing our history and our relationship, and also knowing that she has the capacity to do this because she's had life experiences that's given her that emotional capacity.
Yeah.
So I wanted to share that change is possible because now he gets asked to do things that she's like, I want everybody to see. I want everybody to know. I'm asking him to help me with this talent.
Well, it's interesting because there's a couple of things that come up as you share that. One, like from kind of starting, you said the biculturalism, right? That there is many of us, and even if the two partners or the people in the relationship or the families, both of them are Latinx, Latino, right? The way that we all interact with our culture is going to be so different. And so the expectations, if those things are not negotiated, we're just going to assume, right, that I'm just like now the female partner in this relationship, and now I'm just expected to go these things. But it could be that for your mother-in-law, maybe that is not necessarily why that was being, provoked in her. Maybe she just wants to spend time with you. Maybe she really likes you. Like, this is how you bond, right? So it's like not about not doing these things that are traditional, because I think that sometimes I hear in my work, or maybe even I've experienced, like, I don't want to learn to cook because cook is one of those things. Si aprendes a cocinar, then you guarantee you're going to be in the kitchen, right? So there was huge reluctance. As time has passed, I have found the opportunity for myself to redefine cooking, to redefine how I show up in this way that are more traditional, right? And so the negotiation of that culture is possible. And then the second part of like that safety and conversations, that there is a possibility many times our families are not trying to nag us or be annoying or like put these burdens on you. They may just think that this is just what is expected and what it's okay. And unless we're able to, one, find a safe space to be able to have this conversation, but also take sort of like this courageous step, knowing that this has never done before potentially in our families, right? But that if we talk about it, there is always a potential that there could be a positive outcome. And that's like really beautiful, I think.
Yeah, instead of also sowing seeds of resentment of like, I'm going to go and I'm going to suffer through this party and I'm going to do all the things. Instead of having those conversations, is it uncomfortable? Yeah, it can be. But also, how else do we expect change to happen? Or even, going out on a, limb and asking somebody, hey, do you think you could help with this, so that we can all get things done sooner, so that we can all have a good time. Making that space and being the brave one. It's not always, and maybe get a couple cousins on your side. So say, hey, this year I'm thinking we do this.
Or your spouse, like for you, right? Like, because another option could have been like, hey, next time that your mom asks me, right, I don't know how to have this conversation with her. Can you jump in and say, hey, I'm going to help too, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's like this levels of safety that can be encountered in different people, like the siblings, like different people that we can also like onboard in that team, support us in that new goal or that new boundary that we want to set.
Yeah. And then in our circumstance, it was like, we tried all the other things, but she just didn't get it. She didn't understand because he would step up and say, oh, let me help. Let me do this. And and for me, it was important because while we don't have kids right now, in the future, if we do, I said it's going to be really important for me to instill those values in my sons, because I want them to, when they see other people helping, that they help too. And this is a family unit. And so it just trying not to fall into the gender norms that, I saw growing up, even though it's like not necessarily in my own family, but in the Latino culture.
Mm-hmm. So just like this, cultural values sometimes can feel burdensome. They can also be the gateway to like creating something new in families. And I think that's like the best thing about this conversation, that hopefully all of you that are listening can start thinking about what is the new opportunity that I may have as this next holiday comes up to try something new, with the contingents, right, that we want you to be safe first. And so if you can decide that there is a way of being safe and trying these new things, then there's an opportunity coming up in the next couple of weeks. What are some of those common challenges? So one of them is like the safety, the stepping up, the feeling courageous, right? But what are some of the other challenges that you're seeing from your perspective that people are having in terms of changing these dynamics during the holidays or during these family gatherings?
I would say, sometimes we feel like it is that we have to fix it all in one day.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not it. Everybody, they haven't behaved the rest of the year, right? So how do we expect everybody to behave all on one day? It's a lot of pressure. So also taking the pressure off yourself and readjusting your expectations coming into that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think that is such a good point to make, because there may be, I know there are a lot of people that are like in therapy, right? Like we're excited. We see this like the holiday coming in and it's like, this is where I'm going to try all these things. But I think you're making such an important point of like, just, hey, like, let's stop a little bit, right? Because you have been doing all of this all year. You have been preparing to come to the family gathering with this new found way of interacting with yourself, with these things that you aspire. But it is very possible that the family system, the family of origin that you're going to, they have not been engaging in that same process. And so here you come to do all these things and you might run the risk of feeling disappointed that the things that you're trying are not working. But what you're talking about is also like remembering that change does take time, not necessarily means to give up or to go super slow, but to gauge realistically, how do you also set yourself up for success and your family for success? Because some of these changes may be a little drastic or a little difficult to accept from the get-go.
Yeah, realizing that you have been learning a completely different language that they don't understand. Mm-hmm. And what is the root of a lot of our cultures? It's connection, it is belonging, and that's where a lot of our families and ourselves find safety. As humans, we're built for belonging and connection. So knowing that, it might feel really jarring to your parents or to your family when you say, oh no, I don't want to be hugged, right? And this is my boundary. That sounds very, it can be perceived as very cold, right? And I think that you and I spoke about this, finding a different way of communicating that sort of meeting them where they're at, where you don't need to like put out a stiff arm. But, I know that you had shared, you're like, oh, I give besitos, like I give them out.
Mm-hmm. And I tell the story ahead of time. I always just sort of find a way to be like, yeah, like I'm not like a big hugs person. So when I walk into rooms, I go like, and it's interesting because I don't necessarily do that in the moment, right? Of this, like, sometimes it's like a hug is coming and it's like, ¿qué voy a hacer? Lo tengo que aceptar. And it's like, and it's like just like noticing that, but then eventually, right, making that space. And what I've noticed is that once I've named this for people are actually checking in for consent. Can I give you a hug? And you'll be like, oh, of course. Like I will welcome it in that way. But sometimes it's like that physical touch that is just sort of imposed that I don't like. And so this idea of like, we can prepare, we can tell, hey, mom, I'm going to do something different about X, Y, and Z. Like, what do you think? How do you think I should go about it? Porque no quiero parecer malcriada. I don't want to have like falta de respeto, right? But like, how do I interact with the family in this new way that it's going to make me feel good for myself?
And I think step 0 is knowing what it is. No, because sometimes we walk in and we expect everyone just needs to read my mind. I don't like hugs. I said this once. It takes people a long time. It takes me a long time, right? It takes multiple times hearing something, learning something, living something for us to learn how to navigate certain things. And so, of course, it would be like that with your family, especially if you're seeing them 1 to 12 times a year, right? So just thinking about those family dynamics as well. And we want to set them up for success. So for yourself, what is your list? Is it that, and boundaries there's so many different layers and levels to boundaries. There's physical boundaries, there's financial boundaries, especially around the holidays. And then there's emotional boundaries, and those might vary, right? My financial boundaries might be different from my emotional boundaries with one person. It's just like, I will give you my heart, but not my wallet, because that's just where we're at, right? And so knowing for yourself, okay, going into this, I am my biggest advocate. And I am preparing for this. And I compare this to like a road trip. Like, how would I prepare for a road trip to be comfortable? I would take snacks. I would know when I'm going to take pit stops. I would know when my car is like at its limit and would just need to rest, right? And so I want to treat myself with that same respect. And if I'm going into this experience, I'm going to get good things out of it. I know that. Otherwise, why would I go, you know? So I'm going to go into this. And so what am I going to do to set myself up for success and also my family? And maybe if my eating style has changed, that I'm for sure bringing something that I can eat, because I know that everybody already has their own swing of things and making things a certain way. Maybe over time it'll change as they learn, like, oh, she doesn't eat this. Okay, I made you your own special beans or your own special rice, you know? But coming so that you know, okay, I have brought what I need in order to get what I want out of this too, which is also connection and good times.
Yep. Yep. I remember when we were preparing for the conversation, you brought this analogy of like the road trip, right? And so what has stuck with me after we talked about that with that lens is like that it requires that you know the destination, that it requires you know how many miles you're going to be, how many times do you need to stop for gas. So there is like a level of getting in this road trip to go visit the family, right? Whether it's like you're flying or in the car, but that there is like this like emotional road trip that you're taking where there is an amount of information that will be helpful to sit back and to think about in preparation, right? And that's where that self-awareness comes in. When we are just wanting these new changes, but we're not spending the time and the holdback is like, where's this need coming from? How do I verbalize this need? How do I fulfill this need for myself? Do I need other people to help me with this need, right? So this self-awareness and preparation, just like you would be thinking about, can my car handle the road trip? How much gas do I need? How much is this going to cost? How many snacks do I need to pack? When is the next bathroom stop, right? That level of self-awareness for ourselves in terms of our family of origin, the dynamics are already established, right? The things that feel unsurmountable and unchangeable, but that we can prepare ourselves in a way that is about creating safety, right? Or that, you know, for example, if you're vegan and you know that everything is going to be cooked at a certain way in your house, could you ask, you know, I know that in some families, they're like, ¿qué quieres que te cocine, right? Like, what do you want me to make for you? Could this be the moment where you say, you know, actually, I've changed some of my diet habits and this is what I'm eating now. Would you be able to make me something like this, right? And so it's like finding those little windows of opportunity, but it really begins with understanding what your needs are first before kind of jumping into the road trip.
Yeah. And also knowing, for the most part, right? And this is, and I know that we're probably putting a disclaimer on this, this is excluding all abusive situations. And so just with that, knowing that, right, that in most of these situations, and most that we're talking about here in this context is in a family who we can assume loves you or cares about you, right? That they want to show up for you, but sometimes they don't know how. And so I think for a lot of us in, you know, the Latino culture, again, I think of my tias who they just want to feed me. And that's what they see as love and caring for you. And so if I were to tell them, you know, sabes qué, tía, like I'm really, I can't eat this anymore. Like I can't eat acidic foods, right? And so like, oh, can you make rice for me? Like, would that be okay? I would say 100% for my tias, they'd be like, see, yeah, of course, because they just want to see me eat. So again, knowing what is the common goal in our families. And for a lot of it, it is connection. And whenever we are trying to use this different language, sometimes they're feeling that disconnection and knowing that we are changing the baseline, right? These things have been done for generations. And us coming in and being like, the generation stops here, right? It's like, okay, whoa. Like it took generations to get here. It's going to take generations to like make those changes. So you don't have to take that all on. And being gentle with yourself, because also the last thing we want is to feel disconnected as well, to feel like the black sheep, to feel like we don't belong. So how can we recognize, okay, they love me and I love them, and how can we meet somewhere in the middle here? Yeah. And it doesn't mean that this is the way it'll be forever either, because as we know, things change.
Yeah. I really appreciate that you're naming that the disclaimer is that this is a family that is not being abusive, that is not asking something that would put you in an unsafe position of yourself to show up, right? Because the part of the love, the part of wanting to come together with these goals and the holidays, right, generally is to be able to share, to have joy, to have a good experience, right? And so we're banking on that assumption that there is this area to work, this room to work, to be able to ask and to be able to bring out these new things out of the assumption of best intentions that people are showing up the way that they are because this is the only way that they know how to show up versus to be purposefully hurtful, right? And so that is different. If you're dealing with a family who has some dynamics that are hurtful to you, that are unsafe to you, then in that self-awareness that we're talking about, the question becomes, is this a road trip that I want to take? Is this a road trip that I want to engage in this season because other seasons it has not gone well? And is this what's best for me? But it begins with that self-awareness of kind of having a beginning spot where you're making the decisions about what is it that is going to be most aligned to the way that you want to feel and the way that you want to live life for yourself first.
Mm-hmm. And how long can this road trip be for me? Like, is it just because sometimes we still do want to visit certain family members who it's like, streaming and I can't do this, but I still want to see them. I do, but I know it's a lot. And so what does that mean for you? Does it mean I'm going to limit it and say, okay, I'm only going to be there for an hour and I'm going to honor that myself. Mm-hmm. And so come prepared with a script for when I need to leave, because what am I going to get when, I say, okay, ya me voy, I got to go. Mm-hmm. Usually people can agree like, okay, I don't want to hate myself tomorrow if I don't go to sleep on time, which is the honest truth for me. I just need sleep. But, what is that going to be for you? Or just knowing like, okay, I got to get home to feed the dog. I got to go do this, and so knowing your own limits instead of sort of pressing snooze on yourself. Because this is always also, I want to say, where we come back in therapy between the relationship between you and you. What is that self-trust, right? Because it's going to be, I told myself I'm going to leave at 9. So what do I need to do to prepare for that? If I get there at 8, okay, around 8:30, I'm going to start saying goodbye because I know it takes me 30 minutes to say bye to everyone, get my plates of food and bounce, right?
I know that another thing that we talked about was about showing up authentically, right? And so what does it mean in your work when you're talking about showing up to our families? When we're living 3 hours away, we get to be whoever we are, but then we show up to our families and it's almost like our younger self gets sucked in out of us. And it's just like, oh yeah, like all of a sudden I feel like I'm 10 and I have no power in this place. All of a sudden I feel like I'm 17 and I'm just like fighting with everybody, right? And so that authenticity, do you have any thoughts around how can people remain grounded enough in who they want to be, who they're working to be, who they're aspiring to be, and then showing up in the situations where the circumstance many times like bring back maybe hurt parts of ourselves, unhealed parts of ourselves, or younger parts of ourselves that are still needing to be paid attention. And so that authenticity, what are your thoughts around showing up authentically with family?
I know that when we had this conversation prepping for this, we also talked about safety. And so knowing your audience as well, where if there are certain things where you're just like, if I really bring this out, then it's going to be a bad time for me too. And so finding ways that feel safe for you to remain authentic, or I know we were talking about scripts as well and saying, oh, it doesn't look like we're going to agree on that. But, how is so-and-so doing in school? Or I really wanted to know, how do you make your flan? Because it comes out great every time, right? So being able to sort of shift because oh, we're not gonna talk about that. And it doesn't have to be this big fight either. But finding, really reflecting with yourself before you come to the holiday, what are the authentic parts that I do want to start sharing? And so some people, it's through fashion. Some people, it is knowing, okay, I don't want to do the same thing every year. So I'm going to bring an activity with me. I'm bringing my little paints because I love to paint. And I'll have the cousins and, even my tias if they want to. I don't think they will, but it'll be an option. I went to Dollar Tree. I'm going to do this. So finding ways that you can show up for also little you, knowing that your little you is probably going to be a little triggered. So how do you wish that the adults in your life would have shown up for you when you were younger? Is it taking breaks and sort of planning for that? And does that help you stay connected? And just like how we notice, everybody knows when their phone's going to die. And we are just like, okay, where's the plug? So for yourself, knowing, okay, I'm getting low in energy and that's making me more irritable and it's making my window of tolerance smaller. And so I can't tolerate as much and I can't feel as connected to myself. So what do I need to do to come back to myself? And so what is that for you? Is that planning to take a walk outside? And for that, I say bring comfortable shoes and a jacket because it's getting cold. Is it bringing fidget toys for you? Is it knowing who are your safe people in the room, or telling your friends texting them before and say, I'm going into this family event. I might text you throughout, or are you free that I can call you just to like get grounded again? Like if you need somebody to co-regulate with. So knowing what's in your I'm going to call it a baby bag because, when you see people travel with the babies, they have all the stuff. So if we're going to really wake up that inner child, like what's going to help you stay grounded? Because when we're grounded and when we're self-connected, that's also when we can be connected with our authenticity as well.
Mm-hmm. This reminds me about it. I think I shared that with you last time that we talked about. I use this analogy. It's like birds don't trust. They don't trust that the branches that they stand on are what keeps them safe. Is that they trust themselves so that if the branch was to break, my wings are going to hold me up, right? And I don't know that birds are that conscious about that's happening, but in terms of the analogy, there is this idea too that I like to encourage folks that I not only work with, but like people in my life that are talking about like their experiences with the family is like, we want to build that inner strength and that safety within that, just like the little bird, it is not easy. It is not safe to assume that the branches that you're going to stand on, that your family is going to always be safe. But how do I keep myself safe? How do I strengthen those wings in the case that something happens? I can go off and fly until the next branch, or just go home, period, altogether, right? And so this idea of safety within, so that then we can get to this place of authenticity, is really key and valuable, I think, as folks are preparing to go with their families.
And knowing you have options, because when we're younger, and especially if we're getting triggered into a younger state, we don't realize, oh, I can leave. Mm-hmm. I can open the door or I can take a break. So sort of going over that with yourself, knowing that if I'm uncomfortable, I'm allowed to step away. Mm-hmm. I don't have to do it disrespectfully. I can take space. Or if I know that there's a cousin who I'm uncomfortable with, I don't have to be in their space. I can also say no, thank you to a hug and say, you know what, I'll take a fist bump. Mm-hmm. Like 5, I'm just not feeling comfortable with hugs this year. So knowing that you're allowed to set your limits, and it does take practice, and practice makes progress. We're not aiming for perfection. And I also like to remind that, it will have cringy moments. We'll have trial and error because you're trying something new. That's going to be expected that we're figuring it out. So you're trying to find the right volume on the radio here. And, it might go too much where you're just like, oh, wow. Okay. That I was very stern about that. I didn't mean to sound that way. And you're allowed to apologize. You're allowed to say, let me try that again. But with all of this, it takes practice. My boundaries now are most certainly not executed in the same way that they were when I first started. It was just like a really weird dance because I'm trying to see, okay, how do I respect myself? How do I respect you? Right. And it takes practice.
Mm-hmm. What it makes me think about is also in this vein of self-awareness that it is important to maybe even recognize for ourselves what is the role that is expected of me, right? Because maybe if you're the eldest daughter, is there an expectation that you are taking over the hosting, right? That you're like the matriarch in training. And so therefore you're expected to be in the kitchen. And maybe that is not the role that you want to take onto your family. Maybe you are the sibling that nobody takes ever seriously because you're the middle child, or the youngest child is like, no pueden hacer nada, or like you're not trustworthy or whatnot. And you're trying to really change that for how it shows up in the family, right? So understanding the role that maybe our family has as set up an expectation, and the role that we play into consciously and unconsciously, consensually and unconsensually, because these roles have been activated by our birth order, by our family's expectations, by the collective trauma or the generational trauma that our family has experienced. And there have been these roles that have been imposed on us that we may not actually be wanting to take it over. And so there is this pressure, I think, too, during the holidays that we have to show up how others want us to show up versus what like the way that honors myself the most, right? With this balance of I want to honor, value, love my family while also honoring, loving, and valuing myself and understanding those roles, because it could be that the things that you're preparing for are actually not things that are expected of you, and that there may be self-imposed, because that also happens. Information from the environment around us, and then that becomes the script that we write for ourselves. And so as you're thinking about the holidays coming up, thinking about what is the role that I play in my family, what are the sets of expectations that come with that role? Are those things that others are expecting of me, or am I playing into that role just sort of willingly without questioning it? Because in those moments of like asking those questions, I think that's where we find the opportunity to then decide what is what I want differently. Sometimes I talk to my clients too about many times we know what we don't want. I don't want this, I want that, I don't want this. And we have a list of the things that we don't want. And so then the question is, but then what do you want instead? What does it look like? If it doesn't look like this, then what does it look like? If you don't want to spend the entire time that you're at this gathering in the kitchen, then what does it look like, right? Does it look like to say, I can help with this part, and then once that part is done, I'm going to go sit down. You might have to battle yourself to pull yourself away from the kitchen, right? It might not even be anybody that is saying stay in the kitchen the whole entire time. It may be just like some of that internalized assumptions that you have for yourself. And so then it takes me into thinking about boundaries. Boundaries is a hot word. Everybody talks about it, but I find that a lot of us don't necessarily know how to establish boundary or what exactly a boundary is, because a lot of the times what we're doing is asking people, don't do this for me. And again, from that self-responsibility and that self-awareness, when we establish a boundary, there's also a sense of responsibility for us to participate in that holding of that boundary. So roles, awareness, now into boundaries. What are your thoughts?
I think that boundaries are often used, people will confuse it with barriers. They'll say, well, I set a boundary. I'm keeping that out. And that's not what boundaries are. Boundaries are a way to have these relationships and have them at a distance to where it's safe for both of us, right? And so, but somebody else's boundaries might be different from mine. But look, I'm telling you that this is what I feel safe so that we can continue to nurture and cultivate a relationship. I'm setting a boundary because I value this relationship, because I want to continue to grow here and feel connected with you. And I feel like a way, a lot of the mainstream media might also see it as like, no, you need to set that boundary, keep these people out, right? And so knowing that boundaries are not rigid, boundaries can be fluid, boundaries change over time. And so, and we've all experienced this with certain friends, right? Certain friends who we're just like super close with. And then over time, life seasons, right? And then they're like, oh, they went away a little bit and we're not actually as close, but me and my cousin are really close now. And then as seasons change again, that friend comes back and it's like, oh, okay. But this is through you being able to check in your own self-awareness of what feels safe to share and what feels comfortable for me, and recognizing other people are allowed to have their own boundaries as well. Because while I might feel comfortable with hugs, maybe my cousin doesn't. And they're like, actually, I don't want that. And so because I love and care for them, of course, I want you to feel comfortable. And that is how we also get to approach other people's boundaries. I care about you and you feeling safe. So I'm going to honor this boundary. It might not be what I want, but I value you and I care for you. And so safety is the key word here for boundaries.
Mm-hmm. I remember one of the actual first interactions that I had with you online was when you had created that little video about boundaries. And what I really loved about what you said then and what you're saying now is that boundaries are also about bringing people in, right? Mm-hmm. That when you know what those lines are, then it also becomes an opening to bring people in, because the boundaries do get a bad rap, that they're just about keeping people out and about not having anything that is uncomfortable, come near you, right? And so what you're talking about is that the more that we understand ourselves, but then we also have that other awareness and that love, right? Like that care that also guides that other relationship, then there is an opportunity to invite people into that safe zone that lives within our boundaries. but also visit people within their safe zone of their boundaries, because like everybody is interacting with their boundaries, whether they realize it or not.
And not using boundaries as a manipulative tool. That is a risk as well, because we hear people use this word and they're like, well, you're not honoring. If you don't do this, then I'm not going to do that. And boundaries we don't set them to change, to have everybody do necessarily what we want. It is honoring what is right for us, knowing that might be different for other people. It just might. So if you're going to serve, steak at Christmas, I'm not coming. That's my boundary. Okay. It's like, I'll bring chicken. You don't want to make steak. You don't want to make chicken. I'll bring my own chicken. Right. And knowing this is just what I'm comfortable eating with my current diet, and maybe people have different plans. Right. And that's just like a really random example. But knowing that my boundaries, it comes back to me and me providing the safe space for me and advocating for that. And it doesn't mean that everybody will necessarily perform to that. I'm not looking for people to perform. I'm looking for people to be connected with and to continue to grow with. So me saying, I got to leave by 8 p.m. because my nighttime routine takes an hour. And I got to be in bed by 10, right? And so knowing that for me, that's my job, that I'm going to say that. I'm not going to say, I have to leave at 8, so this whole party needs to be done at 8. That's not the way it goes, right? I'm honoring me, and I'm getting to come and connect, and then continue to honor me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that part of when we are clear about our boundaries and we have that responsibility to follow through on those boundaries, right? That then other people may even feel more inclined to join us in and to be in relationship with those boundaries, because we're taking the responsibility. It's not just about an ask. Like you said, it's like, I'm leaving by 8. So somebody remind me that I got to leave at 8. Well, actually, no, like that becomes part of your responsibility, right? If you said, hey, like this is, I'm not going to be drinking today. That's like a big one. I think like boundaries around during the holidays, my goodness, are huge, right? And then the cousin comes in and it's like, oh, come on, just have one, right? And it's just like, you got to check in with yourself, because though you have named it and the wish would be that everybody that we're in relationship with is going to be responsive to those boundaries, the reality is that everybody is acting according to their own societal scripts, their own ways of interacting, their own ways of understanding fun. And a cousin may think that is how to keep you included, even though after you've said, I'm not drinking today, they may think, oh, no, like I just invite them, right? We don't want to leave you out. And so that responsibility, that when you're aware of what your limits are, when you're aware of what others, what you can expect of others, what their own limits are, then the decision making and the action can join so that you can be in alignment with those things are for you.
And I want to shine a light a little bit on this as well, because I know that we had also sort of chatted about this, about the feelings that come up when you are choosing to not participate in, alcohol or drugs for some people in family, and or even just in holiday parties, and oh my gosh, holiday parties in general. It's important that you're recognizing the feelings arising for you, and the reasons behind that, because especially what we've seen and what we've also spoken about in the Latino culture, a lot of men, that's how they bond. They're like, oh, we're going to drink. And then that's when the feelings come out. And that's the only time the feelings come out. And so it makes sense. I'm making space for this, right? It makes sense that you might feel excluded. It makes sense that you want to belong. And you're like, but how do I connect with my family if this is the way that they connect? They drink, right? And so recognizing, oh, okay, this is where I get my sense of connection. How can I explore other ways of connection? And it might not be today, because we can't get it all done in today, but maybe that'll be something that happens throughout the year, of where, oh, I only really bond with this person when we go out drinking. So maybe you invite them for a paint night and you say, hey, can we go do something else? Or if they're a safe person to have this conversation with, saying, I noticed that whenever we bond, it's through drinking. Can we try doing something else, like going to a concert or going and, playing soccer or something. So exploring those connections within yourself as well and seeing, how do I bond with people? How do I feel connected? And a lot of this has also been taught through culture and taught through patterns. And do I want to keep those patterns or do I want to change it? So getting to explore that. And, I had mentioned earlier, bring in another activity. So you have another opportunity for connection. And no, everyone might not want to participate, but you're also trying new things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It goes back to what is right for you is not going to be right for everybody else, but that doesn't mean that the fun, that the love, that all the things that are expected can't happen. It's just that they are going to look different, and that maybe this season of holidays could be like your data gathering, sort of, holiday gathering that you go to. It's like maybe you're not prepared to establish a bunch of boundaries, or maybe this is like the time where you go and observe, like, what's coming up for me, like building onto that self-awareness so that then you can start planning slowly, navigating the next seasons or the next holidays or gatherings that are coming up, because it may be that you haven't paid attention to these things because they just seem so normal and so expected.
And if you want to hang out and not drink, maybe you're just like, okay, so my plan is I'm not going to drink because I've told myself I don't want to. I don't like the feeling after. I don't want to put myself in an unsafe predicament if I don't feel like, maybe some people, they're just like, I'm just too happy and I share too much when I drink. And so they're just like, I don't want to set myself up for that with my family. And I know that, right? So maybe it's saying, okay, I'm going to stick around, hang out, but I know that I'm going to hold something in my hand all night. I'm going to have a drink in my hand, or maybe I'll even have 2 drinks. I'll have water and I'll have champurrado, right? So you're already prepared, because we want to be there. We want to be in the party. And so is this something that, it's going to help me? It's just like, oh, no, I got a drink right here. I'm good. You don't have to worry about me. I'm just here for a good time, So getting to still participate and not feel like I have to leave. But if you do notice for yourself, I'm not going to be able to maintain this boundary and I don't, feel safe like that. Think about it how you would take care of somebody who you love or care about. Because if my best friend was there, my husband was there and he was like, I don't feel well. This really makes me uncomfortable. I would say, oh my goodness, like, okay, let's go. It's not a question, right? If one of my best friends was there, I would say the same thing. I would say, you're not feeling comfortable. Okay, let's go home. It's not a problem. Let's pack some food because that's a priority. Then let's go home. And so what is that? Do you have that same relationship with yourself where you can say, I'm feeling uncomfortable. I know my limit and it's a little bit too much for me. The smell of alcohol is too much for me. I think I need to bow out, and knowing that.
Yeah. So as we wrap up, the last kind of thought that comes for me is thinking about the societal expectations. There's an expectation that the holidays are supposed to be fun. They're supposed to be full of joy. They're supposed to be X, Y, and Z, your family coming together. And maybe you come from a family that is not what is reasonable to expect, right? Can there be room now for you to, with the additional emotional capacity, with that awareness, with those boundaries, to initiate some of these things that you desire? Because sometimes, right, like I grew up in a family that doesn't celebrate holidays. And so as an adult, I love the holidays. So I've had to learn and to teach myself how to interact with the holidays. And there's been this battle of just I really wish that I had a family that looked like the movies and they, did all these things. And so as an adult, I've also taken that responsibility into my life to say, how do I want to celebrate the holidays, right? So there is a set of expectations around what families are supposed to look like, what families are supposed to be, how they're supposed to be getting along. And a lot of these things from a systemic perspective, they may be rooted in white supremacy. They may be rooted in the movies and the families. Our immigrant families may not look anything like that. Our holidays might be tamales, or in El Salvador, panes con pavo, panes con pollo, and not like a turkey and a ham, right? And so those things. But if you would like to try turkey and a ham in your holiday, you have the room within what you know about your family and what your boundaries and your desires are to initiate some of these things that maybe are not how your family is functioning. But I see sometimes the resentment of my family is not what I wish it to be, or the holidays are or how the holidays are supposed to look like. Then that can shut us down from finding the opportunity that we actually can be the cycle starters of new traditions, of new things that we desire and that we aspire to have in our family. Any thoughts around those societal pressures?
Yeah. What is holding you back from doing that? I remember my cousin. I didn't ask her, but I'm sure she's fine with it. One of my cousins was like, "Hey, one year, can we do the white families too? Can we have matching pajamas?" And I was like, "I'm pretty sure more than just the white families do." And so we're like, yeah, we'd never been a matching pajamas family, but we were like, oh yeah, let's do matching pajamas and let's take pictures together. And we had a great time. But it takes bringing up the question to be able to know if we can do it. So, this and taking supposed to out of it. One of my fun phrases, right? Don't shit all over yourself. Like, oh, we should be doing this. We should be doing that. No, don't shit all over yourself. It's going to just breed guilt and breed shame. And we don't need that. What if we go the other way? Don't tell me what not to do. Tell me what to do. So I would like sort of like what you were saying. What are the things I want to see? I want to have matching pajamas. I want to have a ham because I love ham. And the next day I love ham and eggs. What are the things that you want to build into your holiday? And also knowing your own capacity, because sometimes we set that pressure of like, I need the lights all over the house. I need the Christmas music. I need 5 to 10 Christmas activities during December, when I don't have that capacity and I don't have the time to decorate like that this year. But maybe throughout the year, I can start collecting things. And also things go on sale after the holidays. So being able to really start to build your life in a way that you want. And it doesn't only have to be around Christmas or the holidays. It can be throughout the year. What do I want my new year to look like? How do I want to nurture myself and create a life that seems comfortable for me and desirable for me? And it doesn't always look like it does on Instagram for other people. I tell people all the time, okay, we see the influencers online, wake up, I go to the gym at 4:45 and then I come back and I have a green juice and then I do this and I do that and I read my book for 20 minutes. Maybe that's not your ideal morning. That doesn't mean their success is your successful day, right? So what does that look like for you? What does comfort look like for you? Maybe it is building your life so that I can get up and I can make myself breakfast and I can read my book for a little bit. I have 10 minutes of scroll time and then I get ready to go to work. So what does it look like for you, not only during the holidays, but also during your daily life?
Mm-hmm. All of it that we talked about today, I think it can be applicable outside of the holidays. And so for the purpose of leaving you with this holiday survival kit or just some ideas, what would be some of those practical things that you hope people can take from this conversation today to prepare today? We're recording December 11th. There's a couple of weeks between the next holiday. What are some of the things people can do between now and then to start preparing?
Be aware of your own physical boundaries. If you're cool with hugs, if you're not cool with hugs, what will the substitute be? Bring an activity if you need one, if you want one, or comfortable shoes if you need to take a walk. Know your breaks, know your support system so that you can say, okay, I can text this person, I can call this person, or I can talk to this cousin in the corner saying, oh my gosh, did you see that this happened again? And know what you need to bring for yourself to really feel safe in this season.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love that. And I think for me would be financial boundaries, right?
Yeah.
Boundaries are not just physical, boundaries are emotional, boundaries are in all the ways, but a financial one is a big one because there's a lot of pressure to give, to do, right? And maybe your situation is not that. So something around financial boundaries. And to build that self-awareness, like what are some of those like almost like frequently encounter situations that maybe you want to be prepared for? Is it to say, no, abuelita, gracias, like estoy llena, right? Like, I thank you, grandma, like I'm already full. Please do not stuff me another plate, right? And to be preparing it to say it to your sweet old grandma who just wants to stuff you with food, right? So it's like role playing with yourself and thinking about those beyond physical boundaries, financial boundaries, time boundaries, etc. that may be showing up and finding the opportunity. I think that that's where for my part, I would like to leave folks to with the parts that you don't like, the parts that are not working for you can on the other side be the opportunity to build new things. And that realizing the parts of our family where the dynamics are not as perfect or as good or as where we would want them to be, that just right in there may like the opportunity to build something new that is really beautiful. So,
and you can be the introduction to that. And then that's also how traditions are made.
mm-hmm.
It's fantastic. But yes, practice scripts for yourself.
And we're going to post some role play. Maybe we'll post some of the scripts on Instagram so that you can start practicing. Like, how do I say this? Like, frequently encounter situations. And
also, I have a series. 1-800-Boundaries, on Instagram that I do with Victoria set at the First Gen Psychologist. So we like to role play and put different things about boundaries up. So give a follow for that if you want.
I love that. And so maybe send your situation, and then your situation may get picked for a little role play that then will be available for other folks.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. Put it in the comments.
Thank you so much, Victoria. This conversation was great. And as promised, staying under 1 hour, because this conversation can go forever. I know talking about boundaries in itself can be long and deep. And so today we just wanted to give you some like practical things, and enjoy the holidays. Make them mean whatever you need them to mean for you. And we'll see you next week on a new episode of, go ahead.
I wanted to add one thing.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay.
Just bring it back.
Pick one thing that you will deem this as a success. Like, as long as this one thing happens. So maybe in this season, we can't get all the things done. Yes, we'll have a whole laundry list, but pick one thing. So maybe it's, as long as I watch The Grinch one time, it's a success. Or as long as I have a Christmas tree up, it's a success. As long as I bake these cookies, it's a success. So pick one thing. And if there's more, fantastic. Pero si no, you know what? We got that thing done.
I love that. And so we'll see you next time. And please follow Victoria, because she's going to be posting a lot more of this stuff. And we'll see you next week on another episode of Entre Tías y Amiguis.
All right. Thanks. Bye.
If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share with your tías and amiguis. Your support helps us reach more people and continue these important conversations. And don't forget to follow us on social media and stay connected. Until next time, remember to take care of yourself, embrace your journey, and keep living life with heart, vision, and creativity.